Wayne Street voted to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church last Sunday. We're going to get into the reasons why Wayne Street came to this decision, and we're going to do that now. What is the United Methodist stance on human sexuality? I couldn't even tell you. I can tell you what the discipline says. There was no enforcement of any rules or standards.
What is the rule and how is it being enforced? What are you not going to accept and why? And give your defense for each reason why.
And not having a standard just allows you to do whatever you want to do in the day. And that is confusing. And I tell you, that confusion will destroy an organization faster than anything. And now we got to say, well, what's the standard we're teaching kids? What are the standard we're teaching new members? Again, you lose all of that when there's confusion. A lot of that confusion led to a disconnect between your average Joe congregation member and the United Methodist Church as a whole. A lot of the people would... I can't even tell you, Parker, I know you've had this happen too. How many times people will come to me and say, hey, I read this, and I wanted to say, well, that's probably a one-off. Mm-hmm. That's probably a one thing. But I can't say that because I don't know.
But what I see and when I'm talking of the disconnect between a local church, a local United Methodist, and the on the global scale, on the universal scale of the church, there's been a lot of disconnect. And what I think a big part of that is, and this is in our benefit actually, is the fact that young people my age, in even in Tim's generation, I'd say I see it a lot as well, don't have the desire to be a part of something like a denomination. Yeah. Don't have the desire to be a part of something that larger scale. And it kind of makes sense, all right? Because I can say, all right, I'm a member of the United Methodist Church, and the United Methodist Church does this through UMCOR. Mm-hmm. Right? That's awesome, right? UMCOR's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm never going to bash UMCOR. But what I think a lot of people in your generation and in my generation and everyone in between, we don't relate to that because it's saying, well, I can give my money to UMCOR and they're going to do some incredible things, but I never get to see anything more. What my generation and what Tim's generation as well are craving for is being able to see what actually takes place. In a local church such as Wayne Street, we gave money to UMCOR for years. Mm-hmm. All right, we give money to, we partake in some things through Samaritan's Purse too, and all those other global organizations that are set out to do missions. And we say, well, that's good, but we don't get to ever see the actual product come about. And that's what people want. And we've just become so disconnected from that because we want to see it at home. We want to see it actually affect us, not everyone else, even though, yes, everyone else is hurting and in need of it.
Yeah, it is not that people don't care. That's not. In fact, it is because they care. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. Because we see a lot of things going on the TV or on the internet or whatever we're finding out about disasters. People feel very disconnected from that. However, when there's a house fire or there's something going on in the local community and man, people will give to that all day. We've noticed that with a few projects we've had around here locally. Time, talent, and energy towards some of these local projects is great because people feel very connected to that. Again, and I want to reiterate what he said very, very articulately. It's not that we're discounting what any of these national organizations are doing. They're doing great stuff. It just seems very far away.
And you see, because here's what I've noticed too. I pray that we can have a revival come about, to where people actually want to go. And Wayne Street hasn't had a missions trip in a long time. And, we used to have mission trips fairly, I would say regularly compared to where we are now. And now some of that has to do with COVID and stuff like that. But I credit those national organizations because, man, do they make doing a mission trip easy. Yeah. I mean, if you go, it's almost impossible if you don't go through one of them because they have set up stations here and you can go into this and they already have a post here and you go to their post and you can serve the village, the community, or whatever it is that they're wanting you to work on. And that I have to amend all those organizations for making missions so available. But what I want to see and what I feel like is coming soon in the future, God willing, is that people are going to want to go back and say, you know what, this is what we've been called to do. Go out and making disciples, go out and clothing, the naked and feeding the hungry. Well, I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we can get back into that sense of missions. Mm-hmm. Actually as a result of leaving the United Methodist Church, which is also a great missions organization. It's almost like it's contradicting itself, but sadly, this is where the world's at right now. We need to change our format. We need to change how we do some things. And I think disconnecting from a larger global and universal scale, such as the UMC, helps some churches in that sense, because you're on your own.
Yeah.
If you want to do missions, well, you're going to have to do missions.
Right.
And that's what I think people want.
Yeah.
That's what people want to be accountable to your church, rather than saying, yeah, we do missions. We send money to UMCOR.
Yeah, right. And instead of throwing money at it, it's exactly what I was about to pick up on. And that's a problem is then there's no transformation in that. And one of the things about Jesus, who talked a lot about giving, but whenever he talked about giving, it was always the point of the giving was to change the giver. Mm-hmm. It was never to benefit the recipient. Not that he was discounting them, but giving was all about transforming the giver. And a lot of these larger organizations, again, that do fantastic work, the giver is not affected. I drop my $10 bill and then that's it. And hopefully we can bridge that disconnect.
Yes.
But we also need to address the other disconnect, is that so many times the news media would report on things. We're talking about the bad press in the last point. And so many times people will read things about things going on in United Methodist churches, and people would come and be upset and say, this church really doing that, having this drag queen story hour or any of these different things. And I got to the point where I could no longer say, no, there's no way that's happening.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And so now there's a disconnect between people. It's like, well, you're not planning to do that here, are you? And like, no, we're not.
Let's go on to point 6, because point 6 is also a good topic to discuss.
All right, well, let me say what it is, and then you can jump in. Number 6, pretty straightforward, is the cost of apportionments.
All right, and none of you probably know what apportionments is, if you're not a United Methodist. But and so I was actually explaining how apportionments work to someone who was never a United Methodist. She runs an awesome missions here in our community and stuff. But as I was talking with her, and she was like, "You guys pay that much money to be a part of this organization?" And we were like, well, yeah. So I broke it down on a level that is kind of a little bit relatable. If you're going to be a member of the Eagles, you pay a yearly sum to be a member of the Eagles, all right? If you're going to be a member of the United Methodist Church, you're going to pay a larger sum.
Now you mean the local church at is that what you mean?
The local church, yes. The local church.
Yeah.
The local church has to pay a larger sum to be a part of that.
And let me make something real clear here. Members are not charged. I mean, we do want people to give. I just want to make sure we aren't doing that.
Members aren't charged yet. Members, what you give goes to them. So I'm going to say it still affects you greatly.
Yes. What we're saying is it doesn't cost you money to be a member.
We cover these apportionments, and the apportionments help us to, in recent terms, they used to mean something a lot more. Mm-hmm. But in the current generation, in the current century, apportionments have only been a membership fee. Now, if you go back in history, apportionments had meaning, were very beneficial to be a part of this kind of connection and have money in that connection. But anymore, I mean, if we had something pop up here at Wayne Street's going to take care of it, not the United Methodist Church.
Correct.
If we had to get a roof fixed, if we had to get new windows, we did that, not a conference. And I want to know where the change happened there in the fact of, why don't we get any support anymore from the UMC? Mm-hmm. Because we haven't in recent years. What we've gotten was the ability to use the cross and flames as a logo and be called Wayne Street UMC. That's what we were paying for, and a substantial amount of money for that nonetheless.
And if you go back to the other point we were talking about, the disconnect that people have between the average Joe congregation member and the United Methodist Church, that UMC wasn't meaning much to too many people.
So why we paid the cost, it was bizarre, because people were like, we just pay to have a name.
Yeah.
And so that disconnect really fed in a lot into the kind of the benefit, I guess, or reasons of disaffiliation, because the cost of apportionments, we didn't see any gain for all the money we had flowing out. I think a lot of churches are like that. I know Walnut Grove's main thing was, we were a small country church, and if we had to keep paying a couple $1,000s a year in apportionments, well, we don't know, we were struggling to figure out why we were doing that, and it hurts congregations a lot. So hopefully come July 1, we don't have to pay apportionments anymore, and we can use money in a couple years down the line in a more productive way.
And just to say, disaffiliation did come with a big price tag that we will be paying off for a while, but in the long term, it'll be relief.
And you can see the immediate benefit of that payment, though, too. Mm-hmm. You're paying off the loan to be able to disconnect, disaffiliate. And I think how you mentioned in the vote, how the vote was so substantial, everyone is kind of behind this concept of disaffiliation for various different reasons. Not everyone agrees on certain things, but
there are people watching this video who don't agree with some of the things we've said here.
But we can get behind the fact that the people wanted to disaffiliate.
Yeah, the process to disaffiliate was set up. The idea was, or the churches who wanted to be progressive and change things would be the ones that disaffiliate. They did not. So now it's some of the more conservative congregations have decided we're tired of the fight. But the statute or the deadline for that to happen is December 31st of this year. After that, we don't know what's going to happen.
Because prior to this, there was no form of leaving the UMC. Right. So they implemented this contract and time frame to say, if you want to leave, this is the time you have to do it. But once this paragraph or, law contract expires, then there's potentially no way out, and they can maybe renew it. They can do all these things. There's a lot of options out there still. But what we're seeing is, well, if that's the deadline, we got to beat the deadline. Mm-hmm. And we did, so...
So, and so why now? It's because it's not, now or never really is what it could be. Again, I don't know what will be set up. I'm not saying... that will never be another option, but this is the only option available now, and there's no hint of an option after that. So that's why we had to take it now.
So to summarize what we've said today, there's a lot of things that went into disaffiliation. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned and hinted at, there's some people that disaffiliated for maybe only option one that we mentioned, and some only mentioned it for costs, for the cost. They said, well, the apportionments are too much, so that's why we can disaffiliate. And some people aren't even thinking about the apportionments in their vote that they gave. Mm-hmm. Everyone comes from a different angle on this. But what I want Wayne Street, if you can hear my plea here, it is the fact that we all voted, very substantial numbers of votes said we wanted to leave. Find the understanding and know that you're not alone in the decision you made. And there may be reasons as to why they chose that same answer, but focus on the aspect that, wait a second, that's 124 people that said yes to something. Think of the unity that comes behind that. Sure, we all got there maybe in different ways, but understand that your church body was able to make a very dramatic decision in unity. We're not as divided as some people would like to make ourselves out to be. And so I tell you, Wayne Street, celebrate that. Celebrate that while we can have it. I know I'm very pleased in how that went, and I know Pastor Tim isn't going to save some gray hair because of how how that vote went. Recognize that, wait a second, this is still Wayne Street, and I'm here with a couple like-minded individuals, and thanks be to God for that. Disaffiliation was a dark area, but we are now at the area where we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we saw a substantial amount of light on that Sunday afternoon. Well
said, Parker. And I would reiterate that. It's just to say there was a lot of support, but the thing that's gotten me about this is this has been an entirely lay-led movement at Wayne Street. This is not something I pushed. This is something that the congregation brought to me. I didn't ever push this. It was a lay-led movement inside of Wayne Street, and it was something they wanted to do. And I had some conversations with them about it, but it's never anything I pushed. And if the church wanted to go in this direction, I wanted it to be the church's decision, and it was. Ultimately, it was not mine. And the only thing I promised to do is whatever Wayne Street decided, I would go with them. And this is what got us here today.
And the will was clearly defined.
Yes.
That's what's incredible. That's what is incredible, is the fact that the will of Wayne Street was clearly displayed. And because we were in, again, as we said this throughout this entire episode, because we were in a season of, we don't know what the will of the United Methodist Church is anymore. We don't know where the direction is going, but we as Wayne Street said, we know where we want to be, and we're going to fight to get there. Yep. And that's powerful.
Yeah, it is. At the end of the day, we want to go forward stronger, whatever that may mean. We want to build a kingdom, not a denomination, and that's what we want Wayne Street to be a part of. So have a good day, everybody.